The ocean breeze carried whispers of salt and summer dreams across Oceanview Beach, but Alexandra Sterling felt only the chill of panic racing down her spine. Her 7-year-old daughter Bella stood motionless in the sand, watching two strangers build castles 20 feet away, a weathered man with gentle eyes and his energetic son. Then it happened. The man's hands began to move, fingers dancing through the golden afternoon light in fluid, purposeful gestures. Bella's entire body transformed, her small hands rising to respond in the same silent language Alexandra had abandoned, learning 3 years ago. The CEO, who commanded boardrooms across Boston, now stood powerless, designer heels sinking deeper into the warm sand, as she watched her daughter's face illuminate with joy she hadn't seen since the divorce. But the story behind this stranger's unexpected gift of sign language would unravel secrets that would change both their lives forever. Carter Rodriguez had built this exact same sandcastle 17 times over the past 2 years. Every Saturday afternoon, he and his 9-year-old son Lucas would claim their spot near the tide pools, where the sand held its shape best and the lighthouse cast perfect shadows. Today felt different, though. A tension hung in the air like the moment before summer rain, and Carter found himself glancing repeatedly at the small girl who stood watching them from a distance. She hadn't moved for nearly 10 minutes, just observing with the intense focus he recognized from his late wife Maria's classroom. Her mother paced behind her, cell phone pressed to her ear, designer clothes and nervous energy marking her as someone who belonged more in Manhattan than Maine. The girl's stillness spoke volumes to Carter's trained eye. Lucas was chattering about adding a moat, his voice bright with excitement, but Carter's attention remained fixed on the silent observer. She was communicating. He realized. Her posture, the slight tilt of her head, the way her fingers moved almost imperceptibly at her sides. Maria had taught him to read these subtle signs during those precious 3 years when cancer slowly stole her voice, but never her wisdom. "Watch their hands, Carter," she would whisper during their evening walks. Even when they think no one understands, children are always talking. Now, watching this unknown child, Carter felt his heart recognize what his eyes were seeing. The girl was deaf, and she was lonely. Lucas's enthusiastic shouts about making the tallest tower ever seemed to reach across the sand and touch something deep within the watching girl. She took a half-step forward, then caught herself, glancing back at her mother, who was now gesturing emphatically into her phone about quarterly reports and board meetings. The contrast struck Carter like a physical blow. Here was a child desperate to connect, held back by invisible barriers while her mother fought different battles entirely. He made a decision that would have made Maria proud. Setting down his plastic shovel, Carter caught the girl's attention and slowly, deliberately, began to sign. "Would you like to help us build?" His weathered hands formed the familiar shapes, muscle memory from countless hours of practice guiding each gesture. The transformation was instantaneous and breathtaking. The girl's entire face lit up as if someone had switched on a lighthouse beacon. Her hands flew upward, fingers dancing with eager precision as she signed back. "Yes, please." "I love castles." Her mother's voice cut through the beach sounds like a sharp blade. "Bella, stay close to me." But Bella was already moving, her feet carrying her towards the sandcastle with the first genuine enthusiasm Carter had witnessed. Lucas looked up from his architectural endeavors, grinning widely as he always did when meeting new friends. "Dad, she wants to help." "Can she help?" Carter nodded, his throat tight with emotion as he watched Bella kneel beside Lucas, her hands immediately finding the rhythm of construction, her silence transformed from isolation into comfortable companionship. Alexandra's conference call ended abruptly as she watched her daughter interact with strangers. Her first instinct was protection, the same fierce maternal drive that had carried her through single parenthood and corporate battles. But something in the scene before her made her pause. Bella was animated in a way she hadn't been in months, her small hands working alongside the boys with easy familiarity. The man looked up as Alexandra approached, his expression patient and understanding rather than defensive. "I'm sorry," Alexandra began, her voice carrying the authority she used in boardrooms, but softened with uncertainty. Bella doesn't usually interact with people she doesn't know. Carter stood slowly, sand falling from his knees as he extended a calloused hand. "Carter Rodriguez. And this eager architect is my son Lucas." His voice carried the quiet confidence of someone comfortable with long silences and careful words. Alexandra shook his hand, immediately noticing the strength and gentleness combined in his grip. "Alexandra Sterling. And that's my daughter Bella." She paused, watching as Lucas showed Bella how to pack sand into the corner towers. "You sign," she said, and it wasn't quite a question. Carter nodded, following her gaze to where the children worked in comfortable collaboration. "My wife taught me," he said simply. She believed every child deserves to be heard, regardless of how they speak. The past tense hung between them like morning fog, heavy with unspoken loss. Alexandra felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition of grief she hadn't expected. "I tried to learn once," she admitted, the words coming out more vulnerable than she'd intended. But work got busy, and Bella seemed to manage fine with writing and gestures. Even as she said it, watching her daughter's animated conversation in sign language, Alexandra knew how inadequate her explanation sounded. The afternoon sun climbed higher as the four of them settled into an unexpected rhythm. Lucas chattered constantly, translating Bella's signed responses for his father with the unconscious ease of childhood adaptability. "She says the castle needs a drawbridge, Dad. And maybe some seashells for decoration." Carter found himself smiling more than he had in months, watching his son's natural acceptance of difference. Lucas had grown up around Maria's students during those final years, and signing had become as natural to him as breathing. Now, as he helped Bella gather shells while maintaining a steady stream of conversation, Carter saw Maria's influence living on in ways he hadn't anticipated. "Your son is remarkable," Alexandra said, settling onto the sand despite her expensive clothes. "Lucas has always been good with other kids. He gets that from his mother." The weight of Carter's words settled around them like evening shadows. Alexandra studied his face, noting the lines etched by something deeper than sun exposure. "She was a teacher?" she asked gently. Carter nodded, his hands stilling on the castle wall he'd been reinforcing. "Maria taught deaf and hard-of-hearing children at the elementary school in Portland. She was diagnosed with cancer when Lucas was 4. His voice remained steady, but Alexandra caught the slight tremor in his fingers as he spoke. "She spent the next 3 years teaching me everything she could about her world, her students, the language that had become her passion. One day," she would tell me, "you'll meet children who need someone to understand them." I thought she was just being optimistic about my career prospects. He glanced at Bella, who was now showing Lucas how to sign the word for beautiful as they admired their shared creation. "She passed 2 years ago," Carter continued, his voice growing softer. "And I've been trying to figure out how to honor what she taught me ever since. I coach high school athletics now, but on weekends, Lucas and I come here. It's become our tradition, our way of remembering her." Alexandra felt tears threatening, unexpected and unwelcome. She built her life on control, on anticipating outcomes and managing variables. But sitting on this beach, watching her daughter experience joy through connection she'd been unable to provide, Alexandra felt the careful architecture of her assumptions beginning to crumble. "I'm sorry for your loss," she managed, the corporate phrase feeling inadequate for the depth of pain she sensed in Carter's quiet strength. "And I'm sorry I assumed you were just showing off when you started signing to Bella." Carter's laugh was gentle, understanding. Maria used to say that assuming good intentions was the first step toward building bridges. You were protecting your daughter. That's what parents do. He watched as Lucas taught Bella how to create tiny windows in the castle walls using his finger. But sometimes protection can become isolation without us realizing it. The observation hit Alexandra like a cold wave. How many times had she intercepted curious glances at Bella in restaurants, cutting off potential interactions before they could begin? How often had she chosen the convenience of written communication over the challenge of learning her daughter's visual language? Watching Bella now, completely absorbed in creative play with a child she'd met an hour ago, Alexandra realized how much her fear had cost them both. "She's been so quiet since the divorce," Alexandra found herself admitting. "I thought she was adjusting well, but maybe I was just seeing what I wanted to see." Carter nodded knowingly. Grief and change affect everyone differently. Some people get louder, others get quieter. The important thing is making sure they know they're not alone in whatever they're feeling. As if summoned by their conversation, Bella looked up from the castle and caught her mother's eye. With careful, deliberate movements, she signed something Alexandra couldn't understand. "She's asking if you're sad," Carter translated gently. "And if she can give you a hug." The simple question broke something open in Alexandra's chest. When had she become someone her own daughter felt the need to comfort? When had their roles reversed so completely? Alexandra opened her arms, and Bella ran to her, sand flying from her small feet. The hug was fierce and healing, carrying the weight of all the conversations they'd never had and all the connections Alexandra had feared to make. Over Bella's head she met Carter's understanding gaze. "Would you be willing to teach me?" she asked, the words coming out in a rush before her pride could stop them. "To sign, I mean. I know I should have learned years ago, but I was scared I'd do it wrong, and Bella would be embarrassed by my mistakes." Carter's smile was warm and encouraging. "Maria always said the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is now. I'd be honored to help you learn to talk with your daughter." The promise settled between them like a bridge being built, connecting two different shores of understanding. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon when reality intruded in the form of Alexandra's buzzing phone. A text from her assistant reminded her of an early morning meeting, of the life waiting for her back in Boston. But as she looked at Bella, still chattering animatedly in sign language with Lucas about plans for next weekend's castle, Alexandra felt the familiar pull of obligation warring with something new. "We should probably head back to the hotel," she said reluctantly. "It's almost dinner time, and we have a long drive tomorrow." Bella's face fell, her hands moving in rapid, distressed gestures. "She's asking if she'll see Lucas again," Carter translated. "And if you'll really learn to sign like you promised." The hope and vulnerability in her daughter's questions nearly undid Alexandra's carefully maintained composure. "I meant what I said about learning," Alexandra assured them both, though uncertainty colored her voice. "But I live in Boston, and my work—" She trailed off, recognizing the familiar pattern of her own excuses. Carter stood, brushing sand from his hands with the same careful attention he gave to everything else. Oceanview isn't that far from Boston, and learning a language is easier when you have practice partners. His offer was casual, but Alexandra caught the deeper invitation. Lucas and I are here most Saturdays. If you ever wanted to bring Bella back, she'd have someone to practice with while you're learning. The suggestion opened up possibilities Alexandra hadn't dared consider. What would it mean to prioritize these connections over her weekend work sessions? What would her colleagues think if she started leaving the office early on Fridays? As they gathered their beach supplies, Lucas presented Bella with a perfect sand dollar he'd found near the tide pools. "For remembering today," he said solemnly, waiting while Carter translated the gesture into sign language. Bella clutched the treasure carefully, then signed something that made Lucas beam with pride. "She says it's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given her," Carter told his son, "and that she hopes we'll be friends forever." The exchange was so pure, so untainted by the complications adults brought to relationships, that Alexandra felt a sharp pang of envy. When had she lost the ability to form connections with such open trust? When had she begun measuring every interaction against potential risks instead of possible joy? Walking back to their cars, Bella skipping between Carter and Lucas while signing rapid questions about seashells and tides, Alexandra found herself studying this man who had so effortlessly given her daughter something she'd been unable to provide. There was a steadiness about him that spoke of deep waters and weathered storms. His love for his son was evident in every glance, every patient translation, every encouraging nod. But there was also a sadness that resonated with her own hidden grief. "Thank you," she said suddenly, stopping beside his weathered pickup truck, "for seeing what Bella needed today. For not making me feel like a terrible mother for not providing it myself." Carter's response was immediate and firm. "You're not a terrible mother, Alexandra. You're a mother who's doing her best in difficult circumstances. Maria used to say that recognizing what we don't know is the first step toward wisdom." Exchanging phone numbers felt both natural and momentous. As Alexandra programmed Carter's contact information into her phone, she realized she was committing to more than sign language lessons. She was opening her carefully controlled world to variables she couldn't predict or manage. The thought terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. "I'll call you this week," she promised, meaning it more than any business commitment she'd ever made. "Maybe we can set up a time to start those lessons." Carter nodded, understanding the weight of what she was offering. "Maria would have loved meeting both of you," he said simply. "She always believed that the right people find each other when they need each other most." As they drove away, Alexandra watched Carter and Lucas in her rearview mirror, two figures silhouetted against the setting sun, and wondered if healing sometimes came in the most unexpected packages. That night, in their hotel room overlooking the harbor, Bella sat cross-legged on the bed, turning the sand dollar over in her small hands like a talisman. She looked up at her mother with eyes that held questions too complex for her 7 years, then began to sign with careful precision. Alexandra recognized some of the gestures, but not enough to understand the message. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," she said, frustration thick in her voice. "I don't know what you're saying." Bella's expression shifted, not to disappointment but to determination. She grabbed the hotel notepad and began to write in her careful second-grade handwriting. Today was the best day. Carter understood me. Lucas is my friend. Will you really learn my words? The simple sentences hit Alexandra like physical blows, each one highlighting the distance she'd allowed to grow between herself and her daughter. "Yes," Alexandra said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "I will learn your words. All of them." She pulled Bella close, breathing in the scent of sea salt and sunshine that clung to her daughter's hair. "And maybe you can teach me some while we wait for Carter to help us." Bella's smile was radiant as she positioned her mother's hands, patiently showing her the sign for love. The gesture was simple but profound, hands crossed over the heart, and Alexandra practiced it until muscle memory began to form. "Love," she signed, the movement feeling both foreign and essential. Bella clapped her hands in delight, then showed her mother how to sign family and together. Each new word felt like a key, unlocking doors in their relationship that had been closed for too long. Over the following weeks, Alexandra surprised herself by keeping her promise. She downloaded sign language apps, watched online tutorials during her lunch breaks, and practiced basic phrases in her car during traffic jams. But the real breakthroughs came during their Saturday visits to Oceanview Beach. Carter proved to be a patient and intuitive teacher, breaking down complex concepts into manageable pieces, while Lucas and Bella provided enthusiastic encouragement and gentle corrections. "You're getting the hang of it," Carter observed during their third lesson, watching Alexandra successfully sign a complete sentence about the weather. Maria always said that learning to sign wasn't about perfecting the mechanics, it was about opening your heart to a different way of connecting. The changes in Bella were remarkable. Week by week, she grew more animated, more confident, more willing to engage with the world around her. Alexandra watched in amazement as her daughter's personality emerged like flowers after a long winter. Bella had opinions about everything from castle architecture to marine biology, and now she had the tools to express them. "She's been waiting to tell you all of this," Carter observed one afternoon as they watched Bella give Lucas a detailed explanation of tide pool ecosystems in rapid sign language. Children have so much to say when they know someone is really listening. Alexandra felt both pride and regret at the observation. Pride in her daughter's brilliant mind, regret for all the conversations they'd missed during those silent years. As autumn painted the Maine coastline in shades of gold and crimson, the Saturday beach meetings became the anchor of Alexandra's week. She began scheduling her business trips around them, delegating weekend work to her capable staff, and discovering that the corporate world continued functioning without her constant oversight. "You seem different lately," her assistant commented during a Monday morning briefing. "More relaxed, maybe?" Alexandra smiled, thinking of Bella's delight when she'd successfully signed her first knock-knock joke the previous weekend. "I'm learning a new language," she said simply. "It's changing how I see everything." The statement was truer than she'd realized. Learning to communicate with her hands was teaching her to observe with her heart. The breakthrough came on a particularly challenging Saturday, when dark clouds threatened rain and both children seemed restless. Lucas was testing boundaries, complaining about everything from the sand temperature to the castle design. Bella grew increasingly frustrated, trying to mediate between her friend's mood and her mother's attempts to help. Alexandra watched helplessly as sign language flew between the children faster than she could follow. "They're arguing about whether to add more towers or focus on decorating the existing structure," Carter translated with amusement. "Lucas thinks bigger is always better, and Bella believes in perfecting what you already have." The parallel to adult decision-making wasn't lost on Alexandra, but what happened next changed everything. Bella suddenly turned to her mother and began signing with passionate intensity. For the first time, Alexandra understood every gesture, every nuance, every emotional undertone of her daughter's communication. "She's saying she loves coming here because it's the only place where everyone speaks her language," Alexandra translated, tears threatening to fall. "And she wants to know if we can stay longer today because she's not ready for the magic to end." The word magic had been particularly complex, requiring both hands to create the gesture of sparks rising and spreading. But Alexandra caught it, understood it, felt it resonate in her chest. "Yes, sweetheart." She signed back, her movements still careful but confident. "We can stay as long as you want. This magic belongs to you." The rain that had threatened all afternoon finally arrived as they were packing up, sending families scurrying for their cars. But instead of rushing for shelter, Carter suggested they wait it out in the small beachside cafe that served hot chocolate and homemade cookies. The warm interior was filled with the comfortable chatter of other beachgoers seeking refuge, and Alexandra found herself relaxing into the unexpected extension of their day. "I owe you an apology," she said to Carter as they settled into a corner booth while the children shared a massive chocolate chip cookie. "That first day I thought you were judging my parenting. I was so defensive about not knowing sign language that I nearly missed what you were offering." Carter's response was characteristically gentle. "I wasn't judging. I was remembering. Maria used to tell me about parents who came to her classroom for the first time." Carter continued, watching the rain streak down the cafe windows. "They'd arrive feeling like failures because they couldn't communicate with their own children. She'd spend the first meeting just reassuring them that love doesn't require a perfect vocabulary. The willingness to learn is what matters." Alexandra felt the familiar sting of recognition. "I was so busy trying to be the perfect mother that I forgot to just be Bella's mother," she admitted. "I thought if I could provide everything else, the communication piece could wait. I was protecting my own ego more than I was protecting her." The honesty felt both vulnerable and liberating. When had she last admitted to such profound mistakes outside a professional context? "Maria had a saying," Carter offered, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "She'd tell struggling parents, 'Yesterday's silence doesn't define tomorrow's conversation. You're here now. You're learning now.' Bella sees that effort, and it means everything to her." As if summoned by their discussion, Bella looked up from her cookie-sharing negotiation with Lucas and caught her mother's eye. Her smile was radiant, uncomplicated by adult anxieties about past failures or future challenges. She signed something quick and playful, giggling when Alexandra looked confused. "She said you have chocolate on your nose," Carter translated with a grin. "And that you look funny when you're thinking really hard about sign language." Alexandra laughed, reaching for a napkin while making an exaggerated thinking face that sent both children into fits of giggles. The easy laughter felt like a revelation. When had she last been silly with her daughter? When had she allowed herself to be imperfect and human and vulnerable? Corporate life demanded constant competence, flawless execution, strategic thinking 3 moves ahead. But sitting in this steamy cafe, with rain drumming on the windows and her daughter's laughter filling the air, Alexandra realized she'd been applying business metrics to motherhood. Success couldn't be measured in quarterly reports or performance reviews. It lived in moments like these, in connections made and maintained, in the willingness to keep learning even when the learning curve felt impossibly steep. "I've been thinking," Alexandra said suddenly, surprising herself with the impulse to share her evolving thoughts. "About making some changes at work. Maybe hiring another VP so I don't have to travel as much. Maybe working from the main office more often." Carter's expression remained neutral, but she caught the flicker of interest in his eyes. "Bella needs stability more than she needs another boarding school application or summer enrichment program. And I need to remember who I was before I became someone whose identity was entirely wrapped up in professional achievement." The words felt both terrifying and liberating. She was proposing to restructure her entire life around Saturday beach trips and sign language lessons with a man she'd known for less than 2 months. Maria used to say that the universe has interesting timing, Carter observed carefully. People enter our lives exactly when we're ready to receive what they have to offer. The statement hung between them, loaded with implications neither seemed ready to address directly. But Alexandra felt the truth of it settling into her bones. 6 months ago, she wouldn't have been capable of acknowledging her failures as a parent, let alone taking concrete steps to address them. 6 months ago, she would have seen Carter's sign language skills as a threat to her authority rather than a gift for her daughter. Timing, she was learning, might be more important than she'd ever realized in her precisely scheduled world. The rain cleared as suddenly as it had arrived, leaving the world washed clean and sparkling in the late afternoon sun. Walking back to their cars, the children ran ahead, their friendship now solid enough to weather minor disagreements and emerge stronger. "Thank you," Alexandra said to Carter, the words carrying the weight of gratitude for far more than sign language lessons. "For seeing what we needed. For being patient with my learning curve. For sharing your Saturdays with us." Carter's response was immediate and warm. "Thank you for trusting me with something so precious. Bella's an extraordinary kid, and she's lucky to have a mother willing to completely reorganize her life to better understand her world." The observation made Alexandra's chest tight with emotion. Was that really what she was doing? Reorganizing her entire existence around her daughter's needs? "I think I'm the lucky one," Alexandra realized, the truth of it settling over her like sunshine after rain. "I almost missed this. I almost missed her." As they reached their cars, Bella ran back to hug Carter and Lucas goodbye, her signs flowing like poetry as she made them promise to return next Saturday. Alexandra found herself making the same promise, committing to these beach meetings with the certainty of someone who had finally found true north. Driving home through the golden light of late afternoon, she glanced in the rearview mirror to see Bella practicing new signs, her small hands moving with increasing confidence and grace. The sight filled Alexandra with something she hadn't felt in years. Pure, uncomplicated hope for the future they were building together, one conversation at a time. 6 months later, Alexandra stood on the same stretch of Oceanview Beach, watching Bella teach sign language to a group of children from the community center's summer program. Her daughter moved with the natural authority of someone completely comfortable in her own skin, patiently correcting hand positions and encouraging shy attempts at new vocabulary. Carter sat nearby, making notes for the informal class he'd begun offering to parents and siblings of deaf children. The program had grown organically from their Saturday meetings, expanding to include other families seeking connection and understanding. Alexandra had provided funding and organizational support, but the heart of the initiative belonged to Carter's gentle teaching style and Bella's infectious enthusiasm. "She's a natural teacher," Carter observed, joining Alexandra at the edge of the group. "Just like her mother." Alexandra felt the familiar flutter of warmth that accompanied Carter's compliments. Their relationship had evolved slowly, carefully, built on shared commitment to their children and mutual respect that had gradually deepened into something neither had been looking for, but both had needed. "I learned from the best," Alexandra replied, watching as Bella helped a frustrated 6-year-old master the sign for friendship. The gesture was complex, requiring both hands to weave together, but Bella's patience never wavered. "She learned that from you," she added, catching Carter's eye. "The teaching, the patience, the absolute certainty that everyone deserves to be understood." Lucas bounded over, signing excitedly about plans for the advanced group's field trip to the Marine Biology Center. At 11, he'd become fluent in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and ASL, and served as an informal translator for the mixed groups of hearing and deaf children who attended their weekend sessions. "Dad, can we do the tidal pool exploration next week? Bella says she knows where all the best hermit crabs hide." His enthusiasm was infectious, and Alexandra marveled at how naturally the children had created their own inclusive community. They'd taken the gift of communication Carter had offered and expanded it into something larger than any of the adults had envisioned. "Your kids are changing this whole community," Alexandra told Carter as they watched the afternoon session wind down. "Parents who never thought about accessibility are learning sign language. The local schools are starting to integrate ASL into their foreign language programs. Even the grocery store clerks are picking up basic signs." Carter's smile was soft with satisfaction. Maria always believed that understanding spreads like ripples in water. One conversation touches another, which touches another, until suddenly the whole pond is different. Alexandra nodded, thinking about her own ripples. Her decision to relocate her primary office to Portland had surprised her business partners, but the company had thrived under the distributed leadership model. She'd discovered that being fully present for a portion of her work was more effective than being partially distracted all the time. As the children began gathering their things, Bella approached her mother with the careful expression she wore when preparing to share something important. "Mom," she signed, her movements precise and thoughtful. "I want to tell you something." Alexandra gave her daughter her full attention, still amazed by the complexity and nuance Bella could convey with her hands. "I used to think being deaf made me different in a bad way," Bella continued. "But now I know it made me different in a special way. I can help other kids feel less alone. And I gave you and Carter a reason to become friends." The sophisticated emotional insight took Alexandra's breath away. At 8 years old, her daughter understood connections and consequences that many adults missed entirely. "You're absolutely right," Alexandra signed back, her fluency now confident enough to handle complex emotional conversations. Being different isn't something to hide from. It's something to celebrate and share. She pulled Bella close, marveling at how much had changed since that first frozen moment on the beach. The scared, defensive woman who had nearly pulled her daughter away from a stranger's kindness felt like someone from another lifetime. "And you're also right about Carter and me. Sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected directions." Bella's grin was knowing and slightly mischievous. "Are you going to marry him?" she asked, her signs quick and teasing. Alexandra felt heat rise in her cheeks, while Carter laughed at her obvious discomfort. "We're taking things slowly, sweetheart," she managed, grateful that most of the other families had already departed. "But yes, Carter has become very special to both of us." The admission felt both momentous and natural. Their relationship had grown like the children's friendships, organically, authentically, rooted in shared values and mutual support rather than dramatic gestures or passionate declarations. It was the kind of love built to last, sturdy enough to weather the complexities of blended families and different backgrounds. "Good," Bella signed with satisfaction, "because Lucas already feels like my brother, and Carter makes you laugh more than you used to." Walking toward their cars as the sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Alexandra reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, she had been a successful but isolated single mother, protecting her daughter by limiting her world. Now she was part of a community that celebrated differences, embraced challenges, and created connections across all kinds of barriers. The transformation hadn't been easy. Learning sign language as an adult required patience and humility she'd had to develop from scratch. But the rewards had exceeded anything she could have imagined. She had not only learned to communicate with her daughter, but had discovered new ways of seeing, hearing, and understanding the world around her. "Thank you," she said to Carter as they reached his truck. The same words she'd offered months ago, but with entirely different meaning now. For all of it. For seeing what we needed before we knew we needed it. For teaching us that love isn't just about protection, it's about connection. Carter's response was characteristically thoughtful. Maria used to say that the best teachers are really just guides, helping people discover what was already inside them, waiting to emerge. You had everything you needed to be an amazing mother to Bella. You just needed someone to help you access it. As always, his words carried wisdom earned through loss and tempered by hope. The children's voices carried across the parking lot as they made plans for the following week's activities, their easy mixture of spoken words and sign language creating a soundtrack of inclusion and joy. Alexandra watched them with the deep satisfaction of someone who had found her true north after years of navigation by corporate compass alone. Tomorrow she would return to board meetings and strategic planning, but now those responsibilities felt like one part of a full life rather than the entire definition of her worth. She had learned, finally, that success could be measured in her daughter's laughter, in connections made across difference, in the willingness to keep learning even when the learning curve felt impossibly steep. As they drove home through the Maine countryside, Bella fell asleep in the back seat, still clutching the newest addition to her shell collection. Alexandra glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror and signed, "I love you," to her sleeping form, the gesture now as natural as breathing. The woman who had once stood frozen on a beach, terrified by her own inadequacies, had learned to move with confidence through her daughter's world. And in learning Bella's language, she had discovered her own voice as a mother, as a partner, as someone worthy of the love and community that surrounded her, now like evening light, warm and golden and full of endless possibility.